Night falls over the healer home deeply and silently. The full moon shines brightly through the window, casting long, eerie shadows that slowly dance across the walls, creating a sense of impending doom. A thick tension hangs in the air, as if an invisible wind threatens to tear the roof off the house. Bandit paces restlessly in the living room, feeling a strange building pressure within. Something primal and uncontrollable stirring beneath his skin, making his heart race. His pores gradually darken, thick fur rapidly sprouting along his limbs, his body involuntarily shuddering in painful convulsions, muscles tensing and stretching. His eyes flash with a yellow predatory glow, sharp claws bursting from his fingers, leaving deep scratches on the wooden floor with each uncertain step. The transformation completes suddenly and terrifyingly. Bandit becomes a massive wolf, larger and more menacing than any wild beast from the forest. His deep, piercing howl fills the night air, echoing through the surroundings, penetrating every room and sending an icy shiver down the spines of Bluey and Bingo. They huddle tightly under their blankets. Even in the darkness, their small bodies tremble with fear, forcing them to stay quiet, listening to every rustle behind the door. Shadows in the house come alive, creeping and stretching like sentient beings with minds of their own, creating a feeling of confinement as the walls seem to close in. Furniture creaks and bends under invisible pressure, like the breath of ancient forgotten forces awakening under the cover of night. Bandit the werewolf prowls the hallways, his footsteps echoing heavily in the emptiness, desperately trying to maintain control over the beast within, fighting wild instincts that demand freedom, destruction, and a hunt under the moonlight. In his mind, vivid saving memories flash. The ringing laughter of family at dinner, the warmth of everyday games with the kids, Chili's gentle voice calling him back to reality. These thoughts, like an anchor, battle the darkness inside, helping him not to lose himself in the depths of the animal mind, not to let the rage fully consume his reason. The moon slowly hides behind a dense veil of clouds, and with the fading light, Bandit's monstrous form begins to recede. Fur sheds like morning mist dissipating in the wind. Claws softly retract. He falls to his knees, exhausted and gasping, trembling from the horror and fatigue endured. The first rays of dawn gently filter into the house, filling it with warm, soothing light and silence. Bluey and Bingo cautiously peek out from their room, eyes full of worry and relief, hearts still pounding from the night's terrors. They see their father back as himself, vulnerable but alive and whole. The house envelops in deep peace, as if the night itself retreats, giving way to a new day full of fresh hope, healing, and quiet family moments. Late evening at the healer house. The rain outside has stopped, with only occasional drops falling from the roof. Bluey can't sleep. She quietly gets out of bed, her paws softly padding on the rug. An eerie silence hangs in the house, broken only by the faint creaking of the old wooden floorboards. In the hallway, Bluey freezes. A tall, unnatural figure looms in the dim light. A wooden body, angular limbs. On a disproportionately large head are enormous, unmoving eyes staring into the void. A wide, frightening grin is fixed on its wooden face. In one wooden hand, the figure clutches an elongated object, resembling a baseball bat, dragging its handle along the floor. Bluey's heart pounds with terror. She tries to call for Mum or Dad, but her voice seems to catch in her throat, unable to escape. The wooden head slowly turns, and the empty black pupils of its huge eyes lock onto her, piercing the darkness. A quiet scraping sound echoes, as if two dry pieces of wood are rubbing against each other. The figure begins to move slowly, jerkily towards the frozen Bluey, dragging the heavy bat which thuds dully against the floor. Bluey backs away, pressing herself against the wall. She tries to breathe, but the air feels thick in her lungs. The wooden figure approaches, and now Bluey can see every crack on its wooden face, every jagged edge of its fixed smile. The scent of old wood and dampness emanates from it. The figure stops directly in front of Bluey, towering over her with its unnatural height. From its unmoving lips comes a strange guttural sound, devoid of any inflection. Tongue. Sahur. Bluey flinches and recoils, feeling an icy dread grip her entire body. The wooden hand slowly raises the bat, its shadow sliding ominously across the wall. At that moment, a sleepy Bingo appears in the hallway, rubbing her eyes groggily with her paws. She looks at the strange wooden guest with confusion. Bluey, who's that? She whispers, yawning. The wooden figure slowly turns its enormous empty eyes towards little Bingo and repeats the strange incantation. tongue, sahur. Suddenly the light in the hallway begins to flicker, casting jerky shadows on the walls. A persistent, monotonous rhythm echoes throughout the house, like the dull thudding of a wooden bat against the floor. Tongue, tongue, tongue. Mum and Dad sleep soundly, oblivious to the unfolding nightmare. It seems that only the frightened Bluey and Bingo can hear and see this terrifying night visitor and the growing ominous noise. The wooden figure takes a slow creaking step towards Bingo, its wooden legs making a chilling scraping sound on the floor. Bluey, gathering the last of her courage, lunges forward, trying to shield her sister with her body. The wooden figure raises the bat high above little Bingo's head. At that moment, the image momentarily distorts. The colors fade and the outlines blur, as if one's vision is losing focus from sheer terror. The final scene shows the dark, empty hallway. Only the monotonous rhythmic thudding like the sound of a wooden bat echoes in the silence, and a quiet, sinister whisper repeating the strange words. Tongue, sahur. Then a complete oppressive silence descends. The screen slowly fades to absolute black. Bluey received a new antique doll. It was beautiful, with large glass eyes, but those eyes seemed too alive. The doll always faced Bluey, no matter where it was placed, even if Bluey turned away or moved to another room. At first it was amusing. Bluey would laugh trying to catch the doll in the act, but it invariably stared back at her. However, Bluey then started noticing her other toys disappearing or breaking whenever the doll was near. Her favorite plush dinosaur ended up with a torn leg, and several building blocks simply vanished. At night, when everyone was asleep, Bluey would wake up. She heard soft, cautious footsteps from the living room. Then she would see a shadow gliding across the floor, though the doll was supposed to be on a shelf in its box. Bluey would pretend to be asleep, but her heart pounded. Soon, the doll began leaving gifts. Terrifying, crudely made figures from twigs, fur, and something else Bluey couldn't identify. These figures always appeared near Bluey's bed. Mum and Dad saw nothing strange when Bluey showed them the broken toys or odd figures, attributing it all to kids' games or you must be clumsy. Their denial only deepened Bluey's loneliness. One morning, Bluey woke to find the doll sitting right by her bed. Its eyes were not merely glass, they were absolute bottomless black voids. The doll held one of Bluey's old torn plush toys, that very dinosaur. A slow, distorted, almost sinister smile appeared on its face, unnaturally stretching its porcelain cheeks. The doll slowly raised its thin arm and with terrifying precision pointed at sleeping Bingo in the adjacent bed. Bluey froze, daring not to breathe. The room grew intensely cold, the air around the doll seemed to freeze. A sound, a very faint, barely audible rustle, as if something unseen was moving around the doll, and then a crack, like something fragile breaking. Bluey heard Bingo quietly sigh in her sleep as if dreaming. The doll didn't move, but its black eyes were fixed on Bingo. In the morning, when Bluey finally forced herself to move, the doll was no longer by the bed. It stood on the shelf again in its box as if nothing had happened. But the dinosaur it had held that night was now missing a leg. It was torn off and gone. And Bingo woke up staring at the wall, her eyes slightly wide, and on her neck Bluey saw a faint red mark, like a messy bite. The song you shouldn't sing. Bluey and Bingo were outside, playing under the fading light of early evening. Bluey was humming, a strange little tune. Simple, repetitive, but unsettling in a way that was hard to name. Bingo tilted her head. "Where did you hear that?" Bluey just shrugged. "I didn't. It was already in my head." They went back to playing, but Bluey kept humming. The tune looped again and again. Later that evening at the dinner table, Bluey hummed it quietly while eating. At first, Chili smiled. Bandit tapped his paw in rhythm, but slowly something changed. The room fell quieter. Their chewing slowed. The smiles faded. Bandit's eyes drifted unfocused as if listening to something far away. Chili's head tilted slightly to one side. She began humming it too, off-key, slower. Bingo joined in, without realizing. Bluey stopped. She looked around. Everyone was humming, different paces, different tones, but the same tune. That night Bluey lay awake. The house was too quiet. She turned to Bingo, who lay still with her eyes wide open, humming, softly, rocking her head from side to side. Bluey sat up. The hallway was dark, but the sound of the song came from every room. She crept into the living room. Chili sat on the couch, not moving, mouth open slightly, whispering the melody without breath, like it was being pulled from her. Bandit stood in the kitchen tapping on the wall. Not knocking, just tapping, in a strange pattern, like code, like counting. Bluey tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came out of her mouth. She backed away. The song grew louder. From nowhere, from inside, it filled her chest, her head. She ran back to the bedroom covering her ears, but it was still there, clearer now. She squeezed her eyes shut, tried to hum something else, anything, a birthday song, a lullaby. But every time her mouth fell back into that same tune. Her paws tapped the rhythm against the blanket. Her heart followed. It wouldn't stop. She begged it to stop, but the melody played on. The next morning the family sat at the breakfast table. No one ate, no one moved. Just 4 sets of lips moving slowly, silently, perfectly in time. Bluey blinked. She wanted to cry, but the tears stayed frozen, as if the song didn't allow it. In the final scene, Bluey stood alone in the living room. Her reflection in the dark TV screen stared back, but didn't match her. The reflection was still humming even after Bluey stopped, even after she turned away. Outside, the wind carried the tune, through the trees, across the yard, and into other homes. The camera pulled back, higher and higher. The whole neighborhood looked frozen, still, silent. But the melody kept going, software twisted, playing forever. No credits, no voices, only the song, always the song. The morning in the Healer household began as usual, filled with sunshine and laughter. Bluey and Bingo chased each other around the yard, while Bandit, their dad, sipped coffee on the veranda, watching them with a smile. Chili, their mum, joined him after finishing her morning tasks. Everything was perfect and familiar, but then an unusual parcel appeared on the porch. There was no return address, just a plain brown box as if hastily packed. Curiosity won out and Bandit opened it. Inside, to Bluey's utter delight, lay a brand new shiny figurine. It was a Labubu bright pink with its pointed ears and characteristic toothy bared grin. Bluey immediately snatched it up, hugged it close, and named it Smiley. She was thrilled. Smiley instantly became her shadow. Wherever Bluey went, Labubu was there, on walks, during games, even sleeping beside her on her pillow. Her joy was infectious and her parents saw nothing wrong with it. However, very soon inexplicable things began to happen in the house. First, it was minor disappearances. Bandit's favorite pen, Chili's hair clip, Bingo's toy block. No one could figure out where these items went. Then, Bluey began complaining about quiet whispers coming from her room at night. She'd whisper to her parents that Smiley was talking to her, but Bandit and Chili dismissed it as a child's vivid imagination. One night, Bandit woke up feeling thirsty. On his way to the kitchen, he heard a strange scratching sound coming from the living room. Pausing, he cautiously peered into the gloom. In the faint moonlight, he saw Smiley the Labubu sitting on the rug. Its head was turned as if looking directly at Bandit and its toothy grin seemed unnaturally wide. Bandit blinked and the figurine was motionless again, seemingly in the exact same spot. He convinced himself he was just tired. But the unease grew. Bluey's behavior began to change. She became withdrawn, often retreating to a corner of the room, whispering to Smiley. Her usual boisterous games took a back seat. Now she preferred to sit still, stroking the figurine. At times, her eyes would look strangely vacant and her smile somehow mechanical. The tension peaked when Bingo, wanting to play, tried to take Smiley. For the first time, Bluey reacted with unseen aggression. She growled, snatched Labubu away and clutched it tightly, a cold, inhuman rage flaring in her usually kind eyes. Bingo cried out in fright. Chili and Bandit were genuinely scared. They decided the toy was having a bad influence on their daughter. Later that night, while Bluey was fast asleep, Bandit carefully took Labubu from her grasp. He intended to hide it away. The moment his fingers touched the plastic, he felt an icy coldness pierce his hand. And the figurine itself momentarily felt soft, like living flesh, pulsing beneath his touch. Labubu's grin seemed to widen even further, and its glass eyes briefly flashed with a dull red light. Bandit thought he heard a faint, mocking chuckle. Stunned and frightened, he dropped Labubu. The figurine hit the floor with a dull thud, but then to his horror it slowly swayed and stood upright. Its eyes were fixed directly on Bandit, and its smile, it was no longer just a smile. It was the grimace of a predator. Bandit, consumed by panic, snatched Labubu and without a second thought tossed it into the outdoor rubbish bin. He returned to the house, breathing heavily, and told Chili everything that had happened. They decided never to mention it to Bluey. The next morning, Bluey woke up. She immediately reached for the spot where Smiley should have been. When she realized it was gone, her face twisted not just with sadness but with something darker and more sinister. She slowly got up, walked to the window, and looked directly at the rubbish bin where Bandit had thrown Labubu the night before. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face, almost an exact replica of Labubu's grin, and in her eyes there was that same cold, inhuman glint. From that day on, Bluey was never quite the same. Sometimes when she plays, her gaze becomes empty, and her laughter sounds too sharp, almost alien. And if you look very closely into the shadows of her room, you might just catch a faint pink glimmer and two glowing points, watching from the darkness. They are waiting.